even bigger than it was, or that, he actually wasn't even brought in and vigorously interrogated in the FBI's, secure rooms, etc. I'm sure today he would be.
Did he change his story after that? I mean, once the FBI started, really paying him serious attention.
Unfortunately, he didn't. What he did, the FBI, one of the reasons they contacted him or made contact with him was because rumors were going round that Adamski was saying in his lectures that the FBI and the Air Force were endorsing what he was saying, that actually were sympathising with his story, and they wanted him to get it out. And of course, this wasn't true. And so, on one occasion, the FBI, I think the second occasion they visited him, they asked him to sign a form or a document that they prepared, which says, "I, George Adamski, understand that the FBI does not endorse my work or my lectures, and I was wrong in my statements." And so they got him to sign 3 copies, one for the Air Force, one for the FBI, and one for him to keep. And what he did, the copy that he kept, he photocopied it and then whited out various sections. So it actually made it look like the FBI were endorsing
and of course,
he explained this document at his lectures. And of course, that got back to the FBI as well. And they J. Edgar Hoover kind of flipped his lid at this and said, go out and read this guy the Riot Act. That's literally what it says in the files. It says, read him the Riot Act and make him understand in no uncertain terms that, we won't tolerate all this nonsense, and just get him to stop. But I think the FBI also astutely realized that they were kind of in a quandary, because they realized that if they tried to silence him too much, it would look like they were trying to shut someone up for revealing the truth about UFOs.
Yeah, no-win situation for them.
Yeah, we get round on the lecture circuit and within the UFO research community, the FBI are silencing UFO researchers because we're getting too close to the truth. In Adamski's case, unfortunately, it was just that he was inventing stories about the FBI supporting what he was saying. And, I think, like some of the contactees, I think George Adamski may well have had a few initial real experiences, but then he made the fatal mistake that no one should ever do. When the encounters dried up, all his thousands of followers wanted, what's going on with George, what's the latest? And when nothing else happened, I think he made the fatal mistake of embroidering on these stories and making up stories to try and perpetuate it. And I actually think he did it not maliciously. I think he honestly believed that the story that he was telling about the aliens wanting to spread peace and love, I think he honestly believed what he was doing was a good thing, and that to make up a few stories was seen as being acceptable if it brought more people around to the cause, if you see what I mean.
Right.
I think that's what he did. And unfortunately, when he was proven to have hoaxed some things, it backfired. So.
Well, I get a common question out there when stories like this come about, and you read about the guys like Adamski who mean well, and maybe they did have an encounter, and then the encounters either didn't repeat themselves, or the aliens themselves didn't come through with the goods. People ask the question, why didn't the aliens begin working with the governments, who, even from a casual outside observation, are in charge of things? Why pick these unassuming, sometimes unemployed, and often mentally unstable individuals to build the galactic empire?
Yeah, you could argue that, the aliens weren't always the best people to judge characters, I guess, so to speak. But no, you're quite right. I mean, a lot of people ask that question, and the definitive question along those lines is, why don't they land on the White House lawn? That's the scenario everybody thinks of. If they're coming here from so many light years away and they want to make contact, the easiest thing would be to show themselves before the world, whether the White House, the Kremlin, Buckingham Palace, somewhere of note where the world's media would sit up and everybody would know within 24 hours. We can only kind of speculate. One of the things that, that it admittedly is speculation, but it's true on our world, is that when any technologically advanced society, goes to an inferior technologically advanced society, invariably the inferior one gets absorbed by the more technologically advanced one and loses its cultural identity. You look at, for example, when the English went to Australia and the settlers there, built up Australia, how the Aborigines who lived there, how their society became marginalized. You could argue the same when the settlers came over, with the Native American Indians over here, how their society was kind of pushed to the sidelines. And I sometimes speculate, and again, I admit it is speculation, whether or not, the idea of, if a truly advanced society from elsewhere came down, we would be looking at them to solve all our problems. We would be almost, as I mentioned to people before, we'd almost be like the kids who never leave home, totally reliant on mom and dad till they're 45 or whatever. And, I think of it sometimes like that if they came down and we have all these problems on Earth and we became so reliant on them, we would lose our cultural identity or our ability to progress as a species. We would just be always in their wake and in their shadow. And so I wonder if aliens really are visiting, that has crossed their minds, the idea that, yes, we'll give them a slight nudge in the right direction, but an overall worldwide revelation and then have them rely on us isn't perhaps the right way for us to proceed and progress as a society, any more than it's,
sure.
The little bird. It isn't healthy for the little bird to stay in the nest. The parents kick it out. So.
Well, I could see that if we're looking at it from a standpoint that our older brothers are coming in from the Galactic Federation and they're going to give us some kind of training or some kind of advanced technology. But there appears to be an equally powerful awareness in the UFO community that perhaps they're visiting Earth or residing on Earth more like watchdogs than they are older brothers. They're kind of making sure we don't blow things up. I see in your book a common theme that one of the first things the aliens say to their contactee is, you better turn around from your nuclear warlike habits or practices, because that's how we lost our planet, and if it comes to it, we'll step in and make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think, if these stories are genuine, of course, what I see personally is kind of like an organization or a body of people that aren't necessarily our enemies, but if things got too hazardous, they wouldn't have two minds, so to speak, about destroying us if it came down to it. They might not want to do that, but they don't have any problem doing it. In that respect, they're not our direct enemies, but they're not necessarily our best friends either. And I do find it interesting that most of the UFO sightings began large scale, and the contacts began after we developed atomic weapons in the mid to late 40s, and as we were beginning to develop a great deal more in terms of rocketry. And it wouldn't be very long before we started venturing out into outer space. And I guess, if there's anybody up there watching us down here, then the time they're going to take action is not when all we can do is fight and squabble with each other, but the day when we develop atomic bombs and we can travel to where they come from potentially, then that may well be the time when we're more likely to see visitation. And of course, it's a fact that the quicker a society develops, it almost goes at like an exponential rate where, what took 10 years, the next development takes 5 and 2.5 and 1, et cetera, et cetera. And there's like this real peak where we go from 100 years ago from barely having manned flight with the Wright brothers till today where we can send probes out to Mars, and it goes so fast. So I do wonder if that's one of the reasons, almost like they're watchdogs, so to speak, watching us to see how we develop, and if we destroy the planet before we can leave it, well, that's our tough luck.
Yeah.
We start heading out into their realms, that's a different story. So.
It does seem that the technology almost outstrips our wisdom to use it. I mean, you're right. I mean, in 60 years, we've gone from carbureted tanks to satellites watching every square centimeter of the enemy's ground to monitor things, and we're able to travel even outside the heliosphere with probes now and look outside our solar system and the influences of our own sun. That being said, the fact is, at least from most of the UFO community that wants to admit it, that the aliens have chosen thousands of years